Well, my connection to the company now is that I'm one of 5 siblings. We are the children of Jim Henson, and we own the company together. But before I came to work at my own family company, I was in the business, in the entertainment business, as a film executive for many years. So I started in the film business as an executive assistant at Warner Brothers and worked my way up there. I was 10 years at Warner Brothers as a production executive. Ultimately, I was an executive vice president at Warner Brothers. Then I went to Columbia Pictures, where I was the president of production for 3 years. Then I became a film producer for 3 years, and then transitioned to our family company. And I've been here, I think, since 1999, so about 8 years. It's an interesting question. When he died in 1990, he owned the company, actually with my mother, and he was in the process of selling it to Disney. So he was not planning to be the owner of the company, nor was he planning to have us run the company. So he was in the process of selling the company to the Disney company, and he was going to continue in a sort of small production entity, not the big Jim Henson Company. And then when that deal didn't happen after he died, we had inherited the company from him, and we then continued to run it. But I think on a certain level, he would have preferred it this way because he was always planning for us to do various functions within the company. So he was grooming each of us to be active in the company, and I don't think he would be at all surprised to know that we were running it. Between the creative and the business management, I feel that I'm stronger on the creative side, but I've been involved with the business side of the entertainment business my whole life. So, you know, as much as I feel that I'm a bit stronger on the creative than on the business, the business has never been not part of what I do, because I started even at Warner Brothers as an executive. So I was supervising films in production, and I was always in a supervisory role having to do with the business of the business. So, you know, I've never had a job ever that was pure creative. Well, right now, as a woman running a company, I just feel that it's a good time for women, and I don't ever feel that I'm treated in any way different from a man. I think that's partially because I do run the company with my brother, and so I am the boss. So I don't think people have any choice about, you know, how they respond to me, either within or without the company. When I started in the business, it was a little bit of a transitional time. I moved here in 1983, and my immediate boss was one of the first female executives, Lucy Fisher. And there was a generation of women about 10 years older than me who were the first at all kinds of things in the film business. And by the time my peers came along, we didn't feel that we were the first or the second, or, you know, we felt like we were already in a path that other older women had trod and made that path viable for us. And, you know, the women that were my peers are, you know, a lot of them are chairman level executives at the film studios. That's such a big question. I think they are run quite differently. I mean, the movie studios, even setting aside the rest of entertainment, just the movie studios are an isolated island of management that just run their own way, and no other businesses run like that. And then, you know, as you go a little bit wider from the movie business specifically into television and distribution, it starts to more resemble regular corporate America. But in the heart of where movies are being made and decided upon, and where the expenditures are being approved, it's not like any other company, probably. They have their own kind of unique dynamics. Most of them, I think, feel a little bit more like dysfunctional families than they do like proper companies. And for instance, in most movie studios, like the active day-to-day decisions of the studio itself is extremely removed from, for instance, the board of directors, who, that's many corporate levels away from them, and they usually function as a kind of unit, a self-contained unit that's not necessarily connected to in day-to-day communications from the highest level of corporate control. Well, we're in a transitional moment, probably more dramatic than anything that's happened in the film industry for a long time, because both the means of making films is extremely accessible, and you can just pick up the equipment and make a movie with a very small crew, a little bit of money. So anybody can do it to a degree, much greater degree than in the past. At the same time, it takes so much money to market a film and to get a film to be seen and noticed and to then create revenue for the film, that there's very few films that can command that kind of marketing budget, and ultimately that will ever matter. So we have this big gulf between how many can be made or how many should be made versus how many can be marketed and distributed and actually make an impact. So there's a very wide gulf there. And that involves a technological advances on the filmmaking side. Then on the distribution side, we're just starting to really deal with downloading and what has happened to the DVD business. So there's a lot of transformation. What has not emerged, as far as I can see, is a model where little movies that people make for nothing can get distributed, and they can get a little money back and make their money back, So that we would hope that there would be maybe a great democratization between the ease of technology to make films and the ease of technology to distribute on the internet, but that has not happened. Well, we are making a lot of television series right now, and only a few movies. And when we produce films, they're actually distributed and marketed by the studios. So I do get involved, but in more of an advisory way. Like, they might ask my advice about the creative on it. When we're doing television shows and we own the show, then we have to, we basically control the marketing as well as the marketing budget, and we design the whole approach with our own executives and with the firms that we employ to design that campaign. So it's a little different for us between TV and film. We were lucky because the WGA doesn't have jurisdiction over animation. So we threw all of our efforts into animation during the strike, as well as in the months running up to the strike. And we basically were very little affected by the strike. We didn't have to shut anything down, and we only had to lose one employee. So we were very, very fortunate. Well, I would like to see our company succeed with the new properties that we're creating, such that the new things we're creating become as famous as the older Henson Company titles, like the Muppets from The Muppet Show and the Muppets from Sesame Street. And I do believe that's in sight as we have some great new programs. But I'm personally attached to the success of these new created projects, because we've lived for a long time with the legacy of the legacy characters, and we love them to death, but it has actually been a kind of a burden always to think, what can you do with the old characters? And now they're doing amazing things. Like we are seeing the Muppets on the Disney Channel, and we're seeing Sesame Street as popular as ever. But I'm much more driven by the new and working with collaborators here on new projects and propelling them towards that kind of success, hopefully in the future. I will answer that on two prongs. I would say for me personally, the most trying things that I have to encounter are projects and properties that I think I can make them happen quickly, and then it just stretches out ahead of me, and I can see that it's not going to happen for years and years, but I'm going to keep going with it. So there are certain Sisyphean projects that we've worked on that I know I'll get them made eventually, but sometimes I just want to throw them down and say, I don't want to work on it anymore. It's been going on for 7 years and it still isn't made. So for me personally, that's the hardest. I think as a company, our biggest challenge was in a period of time when we were owned by our company. We had sold it to a German firm called EMTV. And almost as soon as the transaction was completed, there were difficulties in Germany, and it was apparent that they would not be able to grow and fund the company the way that we had expected them to. So it set about almost a 2-year crisis for the company that was really, really difficult, not just for me, but for everybody. And we did end up, after much back and forth that I can tell you more about if you like, but after much back and forth, we ended up buying the company back from EMTV. But I would say as a group and as a company, that's one of the most difficult times that we went through. Well, if this was the Lisa Henson Company and I was just going to make anything that interested me, it might be just a patchwork of all different kinds of things. But because we are the Jim Henson Company, we actually have a very specific, what we like to call the brand box. So when we look at a project and it's been submitted to us, or if we're even considering something we thought of ourselves, we have to actually ask ourselves, does this fit in the brand box? Does it achieve what we want the Jim Henson Company properties to achieve? And we basically only work in 2 genres, which is family entertainment of all mediums, like that would be animation, television, film, but like mainstream children's to family entertainment. And we also do fantasy for all ages. So that brings us up to somewhat adult fantasy shows like Farscape. But one of the things we look for in our properties is we want to see if they will survive past their original form. So if it's going to be made as a television show first, do we think maybe that would someday also be a film? Would it also lend itself to records and toys and live appearances? So we actually look at every project to see would it have life as a franchise beyond the original exploitation. I think my proudest achievement is actually our current production, which just premiered on PBS. The name of the show is Sid the Science Kid, and it's really significant for us. We originated the concept ourselves here at the company. It's not something that we jumped on board somebody else's creation, and we animated the entire show right here on the lot with brand new technology that nobody else has used. We financed the entire series, and now that it's on the air on PBS, it's actually in 95% of homes, I think, maybe more, because it is public television. So, we had the great. And for me, it was I was very, very involved with it creatively from the beginning, from the creation of the idea all the way through all the elements that are in the program. So I would say that I'm living my proudest achievement at the moment. Well, I studied every form of storytelling when I was majoring in folklore and mythology. So I learned a lot about archetypes and story structure and how storytelling evolved and sort of the history of it all. But I have done some projects that involve mythology. I created a TV show for my dad when I was really young called The Storyteller, which was about old oral tradition European folktales. And that was a direct extension of what I was learning, had learned in college. And over time, I feel like I've internalized all of that. But for instance, when I see Troy or 300, these are movies that are movies made of things that I studied. Sometimes I think, well, I really wouldn't have thought of that. So I didn't move directly into sort of creating film versions of what I had studied. Yeah, my father, because he had 5 children, I think he was always noticing the differences between us and who might be good at what. And for instance, my brother, Brian, who I run the company with, he's very technical. And when he was a little boy, he could build models and do a little electronics. And, he was just kind of very good at everything technical. So my father immediately taught him all the techniques of puppet building and later on animatronics. And then Brian went far beyond the technical side and also learned directing and performing. And my father did envision that I would be a producer, and so of course I've followed right along my programming. He at one point when I was in college, I think he brought me out to LA to attend pitches with him on a project that I had nothing to do with. He just wanted me to tag along and see how it was done. So he was definitely showing me the ropes. At that time, I remember I met Sherry Lansing, who was a bit, the most famous at the time female executive. So he was showing me how it was done. I was also, beyond just being sort of shown it, I was always, from when I was about 12 and up, reading his scripts and giving him feedback and giving him notes and go in the editing room. And I did a lot of preliminary versions of producer things in my relationship with him, and similarly, he responded differently with my other siblings. We don't all work in the company, but we all own it equally. We're all on the board, and we make major business decisions together, and we make them very well. I mean, we have done some very difficult transactions. We've sold the company, bought it back, have done 2 major asset sales. We've financed things, we've done some pretty big transactions, and we always come together on those big things very easily. And sometimes when we have to move very quickly, the fact that we're a family gives us a lot of shorthand. So there was when we had the opportunity to buy the company back from the Germans, it was an opportunity that emerged very, very unexpectedly. It wasn't a long planned thing. And we had to complete the entire transaction in just a couple of weeks. So it was only because we were a family, we know each other extremely well, we all know each other's financial positions, and we could coordinate something like that incredibly fast. So we do have the ability to work together very well on a board level and ownership level. And then in terms of the daily management of it, it's Brian and I who are here in LA, and we run the company together. I really just don't spend a lot of time in my life like going back over the past and imagining how things could have been done differently. I actually think almost every major transaction that we did, I could make an argument against it. But we did it, and we live with the choices that we make. Similarly, probably every job I've taken, I could make an argument for why I shouldn't have taken that job. So I don't really know if I have like one thing that I would change. I actually could see how everything could have been completely different, but, you know, you'd make the choices that you make, and then you live with those choices.